In this video, we're going to talk about a phone that's not available in too many markets, which is a bit of a shame because it is a solid device, but in many markets, the company decided to put out the Pro variant. It's Joshua Vergara. What's going on, everybody? Let's go ahead and talk about the OnePlus 7. Now, this is a mini review of this phone, but I just want to have a discussion for the most part with everyone out there. Do you wish that the OnePlus 7 was actually more available in places where the OnePlus 7 Pro is the only one that you can get? Which is a little bit of a shame because I think a lot of people agree that the OnePlus 7 Pro is just a little bit too big of a device. There's some reasons why that phone is too big, including that very large screen. It does come with a high resolution, high refresh rate screen, and it's a great looking screen, don't get me wrong. You're not getting that here on the OnePlus 7, but that also means that handling and ergonomics are a bit more comfortable when using this phone. The screen is no slouch either. There is a bit of a remnant of our previous generations here, that little teardrop notch at the top. But that teardrop notch is perfectly fine. Like, that front-facing camera is not a bad performer, and it can also be used for facial recognition, and it works really quickly. Nonetheless, that notch does cut into what is a 1080p panel, and it's still an AMOLED panel, and it still does a great job of showing off colors, and it also does a great job of showing off Oxygen OS, which is still a highlight of the OnePlus experience. Then, of course, there's just the design of everything. If you open up a folder, it renders on the bottom half of the screen. That way it's easier for you to actually reach all of your icons in that folder. You also have a dark mode across the interface that allows you to customize the accent color. And then the OnePlus Slate font is still just really easy on the eyes, and it actually permeates across the experience of using this phone, even when you're using it with Android Auto. If you're looking at just the outside of this device, it's a very familiar phone. You have a couple of cameras over on the back, however, it's pretty much a single camera lens setup because that secondary lens is for depth information. It's not a zoom. Those two cameras rest right on top of a backing that is this mirror gray. It's one that you can see with the OnePlus 7 Pro, and it's great that they brought those colors over to the more affordable version. There's no headphone jack on this phone, unfortunately, which is one of those tropes that is becoming more and more common in smartphones. And speaking of sounds, you can also mute this phone easily because that alert slider returns from all of the previous OnePlus devices. The rest of the specifications read exactly the way that a flagship should these days. You do get a fingerprint reader that is underneath the display, and it performs just as well as when they first introduced it to North American shores last year. You get the Snapdragon 855, you get 8GB of RAM and 256GB of onboard storage. It's not expandable, but that's perfectly fine because these specs are probably perfect for most people out there. The battery might only be 3,700 mAh, but that's the reason why the phone is actually kind of thin and a little bit easier to handle. Even if this phone may not go that much farther than the 1 day, maybe 1.5 day mark in terms of longevity, you can still get back some power quickly using OnePlus's fast charging. This phone is basically an updated version of the OnePlus 6T, and that's actually not a bad thing. Plenty of companies make new phones that are very similar to the previous ones because familiarity can be important to some people. One of the ways that this phone gets a more affordable price tag is by having lesser camera specifications. I already mentioned that these two cameras on the back, the secondary lens is not a zoom lens. It's a depth sensor made mainly for the portrait modes. But the main sensor is that Sony 48 megapixel IMX sensor, the same one that you get on the OnePlus 7 Pro, only on the 7 Pro, you get a couple of extra lenses around it. One thing that we're learning in this latter half of 2019 is that the Sony 48 megapixel sensor is really democratizing great photos. It does a great job just in terms of sheer detail, and because it's a 48 megapixel sensor, you can actually achieve a 2x zoom without too much loss in detail. So you technically have a zoom on here, it's just not optical. Videos also look really great on that main sensor, and it harkens back to one thing that I was saying a lot before about the OnePlus 7 Pro. As long as you don't use the other lenses, you're going to have a great time with that camera. Well, the OnePlus 7 is a great example of that actually happening. So the OnePlus 7 strikes me as a phone that just prioritizes what is important. It's not trying to get too fancy. It doesn't even try to have the pop-up camera, any of those little gimmicks that the OnePlus 7 Pro might have that people enjoy, but may not be truly necessary. Unfortunately, they wanted to really push the Pro version in order to really put those fancy, unique features in the forefront. And honestly, that does make sense. Just looking at it from a business standpoint, the OnePlus 7 Pro is the easier to market device. It is also on T-Mobile, which means that as a premium smartphone creator, OnePlus is able to put their best foot forward. But it's just a bit of a shame because for those people who don't really want to spend as much on a phone and they just want to have the essentials, there is an alternative. It's just not available everywhere. So you can't help but wonder if the OnePlus 7 could have been a great sibling or alternative device. After all, the OnePlus 7 Pro, you could end up paying something like $699 for it, or those monthly payments on T-Mobile. Meanwhile, this phone can be found for about $600 or 499 euros out in Europe. In the current smartphone age that sees phones like the Pixel 3a coming out, we are learning more and more that by minimizing what we use, we can actually maximize our experience. And I think the OnePlus 7 is a great example of that. It's just a shame that we don't really have it everywhere. So that's when I pass the question off to all of you. How do you feel about the OnePlus 7? Do you happen to have one? Where are you from that you have that phone in your market? Or maybe you imported the phone depending on where your region is. But I want to know what you all think about the OnePlus 7. Thank you so much for watching this quick review of this particular phone. It's kind of nice to be able to use something a bit different, especially since we've been all over the OnePlus 7 Pro ever since its launch. But yeah, I want to hear what you all have to say about this particular device here. And we're going to go ahead and call it on this one. Subscribe to Pocket now for even more content on this and all the other phones that are about to come out. There's some really exciting news that's about to happen. Don't forget to drop some likes on our videos and also get into the comment sections like I said a second ago. But from there, we're just going to go ahead and call it on this one, and we will see you in our next video.